Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we finally made it to the weekend. It was a short week, but with Memorial Day and all, but sometimes it still seems as long, and I'm going fishing again, weather providing. We got a great series of stories for you today, a great show. We're going to start out with a story that you probably aren't really aware of unless you really follow closely, because this is not one that the mainstream media has been touting, although they should, but it's about pension funds from the United States of America, the federal pension funds going to China. House probes president for killing Fed retirement funds going to China. I'll elaborate on it in just a moment. And then LyaWhopper, what I call Elizabeth Warren, she is back in the news. Apparently, a major pollster is saying that Elizabeth Warren is the key to a Biden victory. And we'll talk about that. And then some businesses, you've been hearing about this mask shaming. Well, there are actually some businesses and heroes, they turn up in the darndest places, but there are some businesses that are actually going the other way and banning you if you actually wear a mask. So, my tip of the hat, we'll talk about that in just a moment. But we start with a Politico story. House panel probes Trump rejecting China stocks on retirement funds. Before we get too deep into it, let me just tell you what this in general is about. There is an oversight committee. There is a part of the Department of Labor that controls where pension funds, from military right on down to the guy basically cleaning the toilets at the Capitol building, where their money actually goes. And there's been a big push over the last year to put a significant portion of this money into a fund that has quite a number of Chinese companies. And there have been some true patriots in the background pushing hard for this not to happen. And President Trump has finally come on board. I think he's been with it all along. He just hasn't really been vocal about it. And it really hasn't come up in too much conversation. But it's one of these stories that I occasionally like to break to you because you need to put it on your radar screen. One of the things I like to do here at John Martin Talks, I talk about the topics of the day, but and I talk about some things that interest me. Hopefully they interest you. But I always want to occasionally put a story out there that I really think as patriots you need to know about. And this is one of them. So let's get into it right now. House panel probes Trump rejecting China stocks on retirement funds, according to Politico. A top House Democrat will investigate whether President Donald Trump and his administration broke the law in pressuring a federal retirement board to reverse plans to begin investing in a new index that includes Chinese companies, according to a letter obtained by Politico. Here's the thing. Chinese companies aren't like American companies. They are actually controlled by the Chi-Coms. Chinese companies, there really aren't any Chinese, quote, companies without direct management from the Chinese Communist Party. There are American companies and other companies in the world that go over there, and they have to basically sell out to the Chinese, and we've seen that. But a Chinese company is literally controlled by the communist Chinese, and that's something you really need to understand right off the top. But this person is who is questioning Mr. Trump and his administration stopping these funds from going to China is Representative Jerry with a G Connolly, Democrat of Virginia, chairman of the Government Operations Subcommittee on the Oversight and Reform Committee, sent the letter to Labor Secretary Eugene Scalia on Thursday requesting all documents related to his involvement in the matter. Now, patriots should be standing up and cheering for this, because what you have here is the Trump administration standing up, putting America first, stopping, for instance, military funds from going to what we know is an enemy of ours. Maybe, and you might wonder, well, why in the world would these Democrats, because there's support for it with Democratic senators, and we'll talk about that in just a moment, but why would this House Oversight Committee challenge this? Well, one reason, they want to get Trump any way they possibly can. It's part of Trump derangement syndrome. But the other thing is, maybe, I was just thinking, Billy Bob was telling me this. If you hadn't met my psychic sidekick, Billy Bob, it's Billy Bob Bass. He keeps me straight on the show. He brings me little tidbits, little news stories and videos. He's got a Twitter handle, by the way. It's at John Martin Talks. And mine is, his is at Billy Bob Bass 1, and mine is at John Martin Talks. So check us out. But he says that maybe, just maybe, these House members are really aliens. And I'm not talking about illegal aliens. Maybe they're aliens in disguise. That would explain their probing fetish. Because when it comes to probes, nobody wants to probe deeper and harder and longer than the House Democrats, right? They've been trying to probe Trump since he came down the escalators, let alone since he won the actual election. So maybe that explains it. Maybe this guy's like one of the aliens and they're probing Mr. Trump. They seem to certainly be enjoying it. Connolly referred to a May 13th decision by the Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board, that's a mouthful, to abandon a plan to invest in the MSCI All Country World ex-US Investable Market Index. Wow, there's a lot for you, which includes Chinese companies, and not just one or two. It is dominated by Chinese companies. And these companies are subject to U.S. sanctions and export bans based on stuff with the coronavirus, things we're talking about, trade violations and all that kind of stuff. So we are looking at, and in some cases have actually sanctioned some of these companies, but we're going to turn around and invest Americans' money, Americans that work for the federal government's retirement funds, into literally the number one enemy right now of the United States of America, and that is communist China. And they're repressing people in Hong Kong, literally as we're speaking, and we're talking about, Mike Pompeo came out yesterday and essentially said that Hong Kong is over, that the experiment of Hong Kong is no more, and the independence of Hong Kong is no more, and basically it is now totally absorbed by communist China. That may be an overstatement, but it's definitely on the way, and it's definitely on the bucket list, if you will, of the communist Chinese. So this idea that we're going to sanction a company because of what they did in Hong Kong or what they've related to other trade violations, but we're going to turn around and give them Americans money, military members, for God's sakes, money to prop them up. And we know that most Chinese companies are directly involved, not only in oppression of their own people, but in military. So, I mean, this is something that it's about time came up. So I'm kind of glad that this guy brought this to the people's attention, because it was kind of under the radar screen. I applaud the president's administration for taking this on. And I wonder why this guy, why the Democrats, because you know Nancy Pelosi gives him his marching orders, why are they questioning this at this time? Is it simply Trump derangement syndrome, or could some of them be being paid by the Chinese? Because this is not a good political issue for the Democrats, I don't think, at this time, but I could be wrong, I suppose. The decision, which came after pressure from the Trump administration, garnered bipartisan praise from Senators Marco Rubio. I got to give Marco some credit. I'm actually not a huge fan of Marco Rubio. I used to be. I mean, to me, he was kind of a never Trumper. He's come around some. But one thing I will give Mr. Rubio a lot of credit on is he's been calling out the pitfalls, the perils of dealing with China for a long time. He's one of the first voices. Tom Cotton now has come on board a lot, the newly elected senator in the last couple of years from Arkansas. But Rubio, I have to give credit where credit is due, has been on this China issue really even before Donald Trump got on it, at least, you know, on a national level. But so praise from Senators Marco Rubio and a Democrat, Jeanine Shaheen, Democrat of New Hampshire, who had long opposed the move. In other words, she's been opposing this move of federal retirement funds to the Chinese. But, you know, if you've listened to the show before, and if you hadn't, first of all, where you been? Welcome. Glad to have you here. But one of the things I've been telling you that bipartisanship always means Republicans cave. Because I've been challenging you. Tune in to whatever Facebook you're on right now, America's Voice News. Good morning. Howdy. How are you? Citizens for Trump. Of course, America's Voice News rebroadcast us down their network. You can download the free app, the iPhone, Android app. But not so in the House as part of this bipartisanship. Connolly said that through the administration's efforts to pressure the retirement board to change the investment plan, think about that. So he's bemoaning the fact that the Trump administration pressured the retirement board to stop giving Americans money to China. Hallelujah. And he investigate that. He said, it appears that the Department of Labor and the Trump administration may have violated the bipartisanship Federal Employees Retirement System of Act of 1986. And I love how they throw this last little tidbit in. This is a trick by the mainstream media. In a way, it's true, but it's tricky. They said signed into law by Ronald Reagan. So they throw that out there like, okay, well, we're supposed to go like, ooh. So Reagan was for, and now Trump's opposed to it. So he's not a real Republican. That's kind of what they're saying. He's not a true conservative, which is total nonsense because Reagan signed into law this board to invest these funds, but not, as it kind of implies, signing off on China. The last thing that President Reagan would have done would be wanting to pour money into China. But as I say, this fund includes the military as well. So think about it. You're a military person. You are in harm's way against China. You're defending their aggressive behavior all over the globe. And they're backing people like Iran and everything else, and Iraq, and Iran mostly. And you're going to put your retirement money that you sweated and in some cases people died for into helping communist China? I think not. I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer that we shouldn't even be considering this, let alone actually doing it, which is what we were doing until the Trump administration stopped it. And didn't China just say that we were in a Cold War with them now over this coronavirus? I mean, it is absolutely crazy. But this Connolly, the Democrat from Virginia, said that law established an independent board as the only legal authority to administer and manage the federal retirement plan called Thrift Savings Plan. Well, if true, as the Democrats say, and that the president shouldn't have done this, then that is all the more reason to take our government back. Because think about this. If bureaucrats can decide to take hard-earned American money, taxpayers' money, their own money, not even tax, but the money they earned for retirement, especially right now, considering everything that's happening with China, the coronavirus, trade, military buildup, everything else, and a bureaucratic board can determine to take Americans' money and invest it in Chinese companies, man, that needs to stop. And if Trump violated something, then so be it. But if he did, then what it does is expose the ridiculous BS of bloated federal government, and they never should have the authority to do that. We, the people, need to have that. But Connolly went on to say, the administration should take its concerns about investment in Chinese companies to the Office of Foreign Assets Control at the Treasury Department, which is underneath President Trump as well, instead of circumventing the authority granted only to the statutorily independent board. Think about that. So here's something under Department of Labor, which is under the auspice of the executive branch, and yet the president can't have anything to do with it. It's kind of like what happened during the impeachment process when you had all these bureaucrats that said, well, President Trump came in and he implemented his own foreign policy. He didn't listen to what we've been doing for years, when the president is the foreign policy. I mean, the bloated federal government has gotten so big and so full of themselves that they actually think they have more power than the duly elected president of the United States. And if they do, if Connally is remotely right about this, that needs to change now. And so on top of the fact that we don't need to be giving American money to the Chinese, it also shows that Trump has exposed more ridiculous BS, man. But he says here that the department, instead of circumventing the authority granted only to the statutory independent board. So he's saying that Trump should take that up through the channels. I got another thing, Mr. Connally. I got an idea. Let's just take it to the people. Let's just do a vote right here and now. Chime in on Facebook. All those opposed to giving American money to Chinese communist companies, say aye. Well, the ayes have it. Let me tell you, certainly in my audience, the ayes have it. So, put it to a vote of the people, I think. I'd love to see the Democrats take this up as a major issue. The Department of Labor responded in a statement. The Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board acted unanimously and appropriately in indefinitely deferring the thrift savings investment in risky Chinese companies. So think about that. They deferred it. They unanimously deferred it, which implies that they were for it until the intervention of President Trump. Amen. Thank you, President Trump. It says here, risky Chinese companies in accordance with President Trump's directive and the serious concerns expressed by the National Security Advisor, Assistant to the President for Economic Policy, and the Secretary of Labor. In other words, Trump told them, get off your butt and get this done and stop this. And they did. Representative Collins, it says here, the assistant, let me read this part again, Economic Policy and Secretary of Labor, Representative Connally, it says, remains free to invest in any companies of his choosing. And I'm sure he has that right. I wouldn't be surprised if you dug a little deeper into Mr. Connally that the Chinese have invested quite heavily in him in some form or fashion. Because I'm telling you, China, man, they own D.C. If you don't think they do, then you need to wake up. We need to wake up. And the Trump administration is awakening to the fact that the Chinese have been pulling the shots. It's not the Russians that we need to worry about. It's been the Chinese all along. The retirement board's vote to abandon the plan came after Trump personally directed administration officials to stop the planned changes in investments in 2 letters on May 11th, which Connally said amounted to mounting and inappropriate political pressure from the Department of Labor and this administration. You know what it's called, Mr. Connally? I hate to bring it to you. We had a little thing called an election in 2016. And one of the things that the man that won it, and he's still your president, Donald J. Trump, said is he was going to put America first. He didn't say he's going to put Chinese first, not the China, China first. He said he was going to put America first. And that's why, by the way, those young people in China are standing up against the communist Chinese, Mr. Connally, that you seem to support. And they're calling on America, needing their help. And they lionize President Trump over there because people who know what it's like to have freedom either not have it or taken away from them, they appreciate Donald Trump. It's about time you did too, sir. But Connally went on to say, under your leadership, talking about the president, Department of Labor has overstepped and misused its authority. Now, isn't he the perfect little congressman here that you're abusing your authority? To me, you're abusing your authority when you stand up and champion Americans' retirement funds, federal workers going to China, our avowed enemy. So, I would suggest something to Mr. Connally. Why don't you champion this to Joe Biden and the rest of the Democrats and make this a part of the Democratic Party platform that federal retirement funds from military personnel all the way down to the guy, and I don't mean this in any negative way, cleaning the bathrooms in your Capitol office building, that their money should go to prop up the Chinese government in the time of the, yes, and I'm saying it, the Chinese flu, the Wuhan flu, Kung flu, I don't care, that should be part of your platform. I guess you could come up with a sign basically saying, Uncle Xi Jinping, he needs you. Instead of Uncle Sam, we could have Uncle Coronavirus here. I think we got a picture of Mr. Z. There's your poster right there, Mr. Connolly and the Democrats. Make that a part of your platform, that Americans' retirement funds need to go to Uncle Z because he needs it badly. All right, we're going to move on. Like I say, I just wanted to bring that to your attention because it is a story that is not being covered very well, and it needs to be. Thank you, President Trump. All right, we're going to move on to another political story, and this involves one of our old-time favorites, LyaWhopper. You know, the president calls Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas. I've been calling her LyaWhopper for the last few years because I just think it fits a little bit better. Not to take away from the president, but she can tell a whopper better than about anyone with a straight face, man. It's unreal. Politico article. Famed Democratic pollster Warren as VP would lead to Biden victory. So Elizabeth Warren is apparently the only thing keeping Joe Biden from just winning. Heck, I thought he already won, right? If you be listening to the news, President Trump don't have a chance, does he? Got a little bit of one, I think. Stan Greenberg, one of the Democratic Party's longtime leading pollsters, urged Hillary Clinton in 2016 to pick Elizabeth Warren as her vice president. He thinks Clinton would be president had she listened to him. Oh, really? I mean, really? So the only difference, the difference between a Hillary Clinton in the White House and Donald Trump in the White House is Elizabeth Warren. Are we really supposed to? Now, I'm not saying she wouldn't be a good political choice for Biden. We'll get into that in a minute. But they imply that had she been on the ticket with Hillary, that Trump would have lost unless she could have gotten Hillary to run a better campaign. I don't know. I mean, they've been implying this for a while. You know, the Russians stole the election, everything else. So there's somebody in Michigan sitting in their basement, and they were all for Trump until all of a sudden Elizabeth Warren got on the ticket, and they go, you know, I was going to vote for Donald Trump in Michigan or Pennsylvania or Florida, but now that Elizabeth Warren is teamed up with Hillary, that does it, man. Trump gone. I'm going with Hillary. I'm with her. Do you really believe there were a lot of men and women that voted for Trump that had Elizabeth Warren been on the ticket, they would have voted for her? I just don't see that. Maybe he's saying that there are people who sat at home or voted for, Jill Stein or something like that. That's possible. I just don't buy it. But we know that it was the Russians that gave the election to Trump anyway, right? I don't know if you've seen this or not. I haven't played it in a while, but this is an actual video of testimony of the then CEO of Google before a House Oversight Committee chaired by none other than the clown himself, Jerry Nadler, when he's getting to the bottom of just how Donald Trump won and all the money that the Russians invested in social media. It was their cheating on social media that gave the president, and that's why he's fighting social media now, because he wants to get the Russians back in. Let's see just how much the Google CEO said was spent by Russians to defeat Hillary Clinton. And this is not made up. And keep in mind, the Google guys are no fans of Mr. Trump. Check it out.
Campaign to interfere in the election 2 years ago. Additionally, Juniper Downs, head of global policy for YouTube, testified in July that YouTube had identified and shut down multiple channels containing thousands of videos associated with the Russian misinformation campaign. Does Google now know the full extent to which its online platforms were exploited by Russian actors in the election 2 years ago?
We have, we undertook a very thorough investigation, and in 2016, we now know that there were two main ad accounts linked to Russia, which advertised on Google for about $4,700 in advertising. We also found other limited...
Total of $4,700?
That's right. which was, no amount is okay
That's
here.
shocking.
But,
That's good enough. Shocking, is it not, that Google said they had investigated, and there were 2 accounts, not just one, but 2 accounts that spent a grand total of $4,700 to push for Trump's election, I suppose. I mean, he should have won by a landslide, right? It's just ridiculous. All this crap they keep coming up with is absolutely ridiculous. Do any of you snowflakes actually believe that the Russians bought the election for Donald Trump? I mean, Facebook said that they spent maybe $100,000, and Google, you heard the Google guy who hates Trump, by the way, say they spent $4,700. I mean, give me a break. But Nadler he keeps going into it, right? I mean, he's getting to the truth. Now Greenberg, he's the guy that's pushing for, he's this pollster pushing for, from his own videos, that they can drown him out. And they could just sit in the background, squawking and go, LyaWhopper, LyaWhopper. Maybe that'll plant the seed in Joe Biden and he'll come your way. Earlier this month, he briefed top Biden campaign officials on 2 battleground surveys conducted by his firm, accompanied by a slide presentation that was obtained by Politico. Boy, that was exciting, right? Greenberg addressed the question hanging over Biden and his inner circle: which vice presidential candidate will help the most in November? And they say the conclusion was blunt. Senator Warren is the obvious solution. So Senator Warren is going to deliver Joe Biden the presidency. And why is she so interested in it now, by the way? Probably because she knows that Joe Biden, if he actually wins, ain't going to be president, either not in reality or not for very long, and she'll be the de facto president. Why else would she want to do it? Biden's biggest problem, Greenberg said, is that the Democratic Party has not unified behind him. But the polls are all showing that he's like clobbering Trump, right? But they're not behind him. In fact, Biden, now this is really important, and I've talked about this for a while. As I say, the best way to watch our podcast, check it out. Go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page. Like it, share it with others. Go to America's Voice News. I told you all about them. We also have a YouTube channel. Spell it all the way out, John Martin Talks. It'll pop up and you can see our archive videos. But I've been telling you these statistics right here. And if true, Biden could be through. Biden is now behind where Clinton was with Bernie Sanders voters in 2016. So Bernie Sanders voters were more behind Hillary at this point back in 2016 than they are behind Joe Biden. That's big. With more than 20% of the Democratic Socialist backers saying they would not vote for him, even as 87% of them pledged to vote for a Democrat in Congress. That is big. Think about that. That 87% of them say that they're going to vote for a Democrat for Congress, but a good chunk of them are saying they're not going to vote for Biden at the moment. They're going to vote third party or Trump or not at all. So, I guess this brings up the question, is Hillary, Biden is no Hillary. That's no one's arguing that. He ain't no Hillary, man. Is it too late for Hillary? Could she actually make a comeback on this? I don't think so. But, just in case she decides she wants to get in a White House, we got one for her. She could have that one. Greenberg believes picking Warren is the clearest and easiest way to coalesce the party. He adds that Biden can't simply match Clinton's performance. He has to surpass it in order to ensure victory. Like I say, I thought Trump had already lost, man. It's just crazy. In measuring several different messages, various candidates without their names attached. So what this guy did is he put messages out there from various people who are being considered or should be considered for vice president without their names on it, just to see how it would ring. I guess that makes sense. But he said and Greenberg told Biden's team that Warren's message about a rigged system was dominant among the group Biden needs. Well, no wonder, because the system has been rigged clearly against Bernie now for 2 different campaign cycles. So no wonder Bernie progressives feel like the system is rigged, because they're the one that's been rigged against. That don't mean they're going to jump behind Biden. I don't know where he comes from. Or Miss LyaWhopper Elizabeth Warren. I'll talk about exactly why in just a moment. But Greenberg told Biden's team that Warren's message about a rigged system was dominant among the groups Biden needs, such as millennials who feel disillusioned by the tumultuous of recent decades. Well, they've been screwed more than once, right? But they need to fact check. Can they fact check this guy? I mean, he's given an opinion that the system is rigged, right? President Trump said on Twitter that the mail-in voting would be rigged, and he was, quote, fact-checked by that. So why isn't this dude fact-checked? And have you noticed the latest thing? They keep trying to confuse the issue, the Democrats do, and the media, which are lockstep, about absentee ballots versus straight mail-in voting. And they talk about Kellyanne Conway has voted absentee, the president's voted absentee, and his new Kayleigh McEnany, I think that's how you say his name, the new press secretary has voted like by mail 12 times. Yes, they have probably. I've done it, I think, once, maybe twice in my life. It's called absentee voting. It is done through the mail, but you have to personally request the ballot. The all mail-in voting, which is totally disingenuous and an absolute lie. You talk about something Twitter needs to fact check. It's this idea of comparing what Kayleigh McEnany did or Kellyanne Conway or President Trump voting absentee with the all mail-in ballot, because the all mail-in ballot means that every person registered to vote, regardless if they're still alive or not, get a ballot. I heard one voter on a radio show a couple of days ago say that in New York he was sent the all mail-in ballot, and he had two people living at his home and been there for like a decade. He received three ballots, two of which the people had not lived there since like in the 60s. And the other one he didn't even know anything about. But he got 5 ballots sent to his house. Now, could he not sign them, put them back in, sell them, whatever? The total mail-in ballot, don't fall for it. It is totally different than an absentee ballot. And they are trying to sell you a bill of goods. What they're trying to do is sell our republic down the river. This is actually bigger than Donald Trump. The TDS is real, Trump Derangement Syndrome, and they're trying to get rid of Trump no matter what. But what they're actually doing, and they may not intentionally be doing this, but we need to understand that this is the consequence. It would not only likely defeat Donald Trump, but it would defeat our Constitution and tear it asunder, which to me is much bigger than any given president, including Donald Trump, which I'm 100% for. Above all else, Greenberg argued, this is the guy who's pushing for Elizabeth Warren, above all else, the Democratic Party needs consolidation. That's where the overwhelming percentage of voters are. And he's right about that. If those statistics about Bernie hold true, Bernie's voters, Mr. Biden is done. In his presentation, which he entitled The Obvious Solution, Greenberg wrote, the biggest threat to Democrats in 2020 is the lack of support and disengagement of millennials and fragmentation of non-Biden primary voters. Who are the Biden primary voters? I mean, is anyone, I keep asking this question and I haven't gotten a response yet. If you are out there and you are passionate, I'm not talking about anti-Trump, I get that, but are you passionately for Joe Biden? Please identify yourself and tell me why. And don't mention Donald Trump's name. Tell me why you're passionate for Joe Biden. No one has taken me up on that challenge. Biden has recently begun vetting several women for vice president, some allies of 3 of his former rivals. Of course, Obama's come out now and said that Biden should pick a person who has run for president, which kind of throws a couple of people. Basically, it anoints Kamala Harris, I would think, because he says that if you hadn't been in the presidential politics, it'll eat you alive. And he might be right about that. But former rival Senators Amy Klobuchar, she was high on the list, but now they're thinking they need a black woman. Kamala Harris, there you go. And Warren, of course, Warren can be whatever you want to be, man. She can channel. I'm sure she could be black. I mean, she's certainly been Cherokee. She could probably be black. She's her own DNA test proved that she's one of the whitest women to ever walk the planet. But she's a Cherokee, right? The Cherokee people don't like it. But Kamala Harris and Warren have an edge because of their experience running for president themselves. He's also considering, talking about Biden, he's also considering New Hampshire Senator Maggie Hassan, New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grissom, and Florida Representative Val Demings. Of course, he's supposedly considering the lady from Michigan as well. But what? No Stacey Abrams? You mean Stacey Abrams is not in this article? They talk about it a little bit later, but she's not one of the primary people? I mean, do you really want to get Stacey mad? I mean, after all, she's like a runway model, right? Have you seen this? I mean, how crazy it is. Well, you know, if you're new to the show, you might not understand this, but one of the things I always try to do here at JMT, me and Billy Bob, we're always trying to be helpful. And I don't mind trying to help the Democrats a little bit. I got a solution for you. And it would be a heck of a lot more interesting than watching Joe trying to drown, talk over geese in his basement. Let's have a battle royale. Let's bring back like the WWE, have a battle cage match royale, put all these women in it, Stacey Abrams, all of them, let them choose weapons if old LyaWhopper wants a tomahawk, and see which one of them comes out. Put it on pay-per-view, raise money for Biden. Not only would he get a lot of money, but it would draw a whole lot more viewers than any of his rallies are, both virtual or real, if he ever has one. I'm just trying to help. I'm just saying, let's see it. I would actually pay to see that. Greenberg's argument that Warren is that sexist, by the way? I'm politically incorrect, so I really don't care. Greenberg's argument that Warren would be the shrewdest choice politically cuts against much of the conventional wisdom which holds that she may be capable governing partner, but does not bring much political upside. You think? She couldn't even win her own Senate. She couldn't even win in Massachusetts, for God's sake. So she ain't bringing a whole lot to the table. Among the raps against her, her left-wing positions would alienate suburban voters the party needs, and Trump would have a field day going after her. And here's the thing. No, they don't even mention the fact that Bernie bros, and I've talked to quite a few of them, and I've read a lot of what they wrote. The Bernie bros, they hate Elizabeth Warren. I can't emphasize that enough. They absolutely hate Elizabeth Warren. They think that she's one of the reasons why her attack on Bernie, there's multiple reasons, but that one she attacked him when she basically called him a liar on national TV, that put them over the top. They hate her. In fact, I have a good friend of mine, I'll let him remain anonymous, who is a diehard Bernie supporter, and he told me he's going to vote for Biden, but if he picks Elizabeth Warren, he will not, because he hates her that much. And trust me, he's not alone on that. And here's the thing about this whole deal. Has a VP ever really been that important? Has a VP ever delivered even a state, let alone an election for president? We talk about it all the time, but it really turns out to be much ado about nothing. If it's true this time that it's vitally important who they pick for VP, you know what that says? It shows how weak Biden is. This has zippo to do with Elizabeth Warren. This is about the weakness of Joe Biden, because they know, the Democrats know what I've been telling you for weeks and even months now. This campaign is not about Joe Biden. If it is about Joe Biden, he cannot win. This campaign is about one person, Donald J. Trump, and whether or not two things. One, are his supporters still with him, and are they going to come back in droves like they did in 2016? I think yes is the answer to that. And the other side of that is Donald Trump's performance, if you consider it poor, like with the pandemic and all that, which there's still a lot of chips to fall and all that, so I'm not saying it couldn't. Would it motivate people to come out and vote against him for that reason? Those are the only two things that could defeat Donald Trump. It is not Joe Biden, and I don't think it really matters who his VP is, and it's not going to be Michelle Obama. Let me just tell you, I could be wrong, but it's not going to be her. She's not going to take the pay cut to do it. And of course, Biden, well, he's going to keep sniffing around till he finds the right one. Let me check it out. Yeah, we got enough time for this next story here. This is a pretty interesting one. It's kind of one of those ones that makes me kind of chuckle. I like to be, one of my goals is to be seriously entertaining here. So I hope I achieve that, at least somewhat, on a daily basis. But this is a Washington Post article, which is a joke in and of itself, right? It says, sorry, no mask allowed. Some businesses pledge to keep out customers who cover their faces. So you know right now people are getting mask shamed, man. If you're not wearing a mask, shame on you. Get the hell out this door. All that kind of stuff, man. But there are people who are standing up and said, enough is enough. I ain't wearing a mask, and I don't even want people in my business wearing them. Remember when wearing a mask into a store would get you arrested? Apparently not anymore. For 64 days, Kevin Smith had shut down the Liberty Tree Tavern. I love the name of that. Is it a coincidence that he's got Liberty Tree Tavern? Which, what did Thomas Jefferson say about the Tree of Liberty? It has to be watered with the blood of patriots. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But you can be patriotic in multiple ways. But I love the name of that. Liberty Tree Tavern to comply with government orders. So he shut it down for 64 days. Now he is cleaning and disinfecting and removing stools to cut seating. When they say removing stools, that has a whole new meaning in San Francisco, but I digress. Removing stools to cut seating by 3/4 as he prepared to reopen the bar. Think about that. The man has been closed for 64 days. It chokes me up to say that.